He was a billionaire. She was a single mom working double shifts. He left her a $0 tip in front of everyone. She went home humiliated, fired the next day, and almost gave up. But what no one knew was that the zero wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a truth that would destroy a powerful company and change her life forever. No one noticed the man when he walked in. That was the strange part. In a restaurant packed with noise, laughter, and clinking plates, he moved quietly, calm, controlled, dressed in a dark suit that didn't scream wealth, but whispered it. The kind of wealth that didn't need attention. Sarah noticed him immediately. She always did. Single mothers learn to read people quickly. It's survival. And this man carried himself differently. He didn't rush, he didn't smile, he didn't look at his phone, he simply sat down at the corner table and waited. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and took a breath. Another table. Another order. Another night she had to survive. "Good evening, sir," she said gently. "Welcome." The man looked up. His eyes were sharp but not cruel. "I'll have coffee," he said. Black. That was it. No appetizer. No questions. No small talk. Sarah nodded and walked away, unaware that several pairs of eyes were already watching that table. Some whispered, others stared. A few recognized him. And when they did, the atmosphere shifted. "That's him," someone murmured. Sarah didn't hear it. She was too busy juggling orders, refilling drinks, apologizing for delays. The restaurant was understaffed. As usual. When she returned with the coffee, the man thanked her quietly. He didn't complain when it cooled, didn't ask for refills, didn't rush her. He simply watched. The way she smiled at rude customers, the way she apologized even when it wasn't her fault. The way she kept going, even when exhaustion sat heavy in her eyes. Hours passed. Finally, he stood. Sarah brought the check, placed it neatly on the table, and wished him a good night. He said nothing. Moments later, she picked up the receipt. Her heart stopped. Tipped. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Around her, whispers grew louder. "A billionaire? He left nothing? Wow, that's cold." Sarah felt heat rush to her face. Shame, confusion, pain. Her manager noticed too. He frowned, then he smiled, but not kindly. "Some people," he said loudly, "don't deserve generosity." Sarah swallowed hard. She had no idea that this receipt, this moment, was only the beginning. The whispers didn't stop. They followed Sarah as she cleared tables. They clung to her like smoke. Some customers avoided her eyes. Others stared openly, as if she had done something wrong. The receipt had already traveled farther than she had. "Did you hear? A billionaire left her nothing." She must have messed up. Sarah pretended not to hear. She always did. Pretending was cheaper than crying. Her manager, Mark, leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He was watching her now, not with concern but calculation. The kind of look people give when they smell trouble and decide who to blame. Sarah approached him carefully. "Mark," she said quietly, "did the gentleman say anything before he left?" Mark scoffed. "He said enough." Her stomach tightened. "What did he say?" Mark leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. "He didn't like your attitude." Sarah blinked. "My attitude?" He felt rushed, disrespected, uncomfortable. None of it made sense. Sarah replayed every second in her mind, every word, every movement. She had treated him like every other customer, maybe better. "I was polite," she said. "I did everything right." Mark straightened. "Well," he said coldly, "that's not what he thinks." The rest of the shift dragged on like punishment. Orders piled up, plates shattered. Someone complained about cold food, another about slow service, and every mistake, whether hers or not, was suddenly her fault. By closing time, Sarah's legs trembled. Her hands ached. She wiped down the last table when Mark called her into the office. Now, the room smelled like stale coffee and paperwork. Mark didn't sit. Neither did she. He folded his arms. "I'm getting pressure from above," he said. "We can't afford bad reviews, especially from someone like him." Sarah's chest tightened. "You're not saying—" "I am." The word hung in the air. "Effective immediately," Mark continued. "We're letting you go." The world tilted. "No warning?" she whispered. "No investigation? I've worked here 3 years." Mark shrugged. "Business is business." Sarah walked out with her final paycheck folded in her hand. Outside, rain had started falling. She stood under the flickering streetlight, holding a receipt that said dollars, realizing she hadn't just lost a tip, she had lost everything. And she still had no idea why. The rain didn't slow. It poured harder, like the sky itself had decided to punish her. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter as she walked, each step heavy, every streetlight blurring into the next. Her shoes were soaked, her hair clung to her face. She didn't bother wiping the tears anymore. The rain made it easier to pretend they weren't there. Her phone buzzed. She stopped under a bus shelter and looked at the screen. Daycare. Payment overdue. Her chest tightened. She did the math in her head without meaning to. Final paycheck. Rent due in 5 days. Groceries already stretched thin. 2 kids waiting at home, expecting dinner, expecting answers. She had none. As she walked again, her mind replayed the night on a loop. The man's face, his silence, the receipt, $0. It wasn't the money that hurt the most. It was what it said, that she wasn't worth anything, that all her effort meant nothing. She reached her apartment building, old, cracked, barely standing. The hallway smelled like damp carpet and regret. She climbed the stairs slowly, counting each step like it might distract her from the fear growing in her chest. Inside, the lights were off. "Mom," a small voice called. Her daughter Lily peeked around the corner, 8 years old, too observant, too quiet. "You're home late," Lily said. Sarah forced a smile. "Busy night, sweetheart." Her son, Marcus, sat at the table with his homework spread out. He looked up. "Did you get the job bonus you talked about?" The question hit like a punch. Sarah knelt in front of them, pulling them close. "Not tonight," she said softly, "but we'll be okay." She hoped it sounded believable. After they were asleep, Sarah sat alone at the table, the receipt laid flat in front of her like evidence. She stared at it. Something bothered her. Not the zero, not the humiliation, but the way the man had looked at her before he left. Not angry, not disappointed, almost thoughtful. She flipped the receipt over. Blank. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. For the first time that night, Sarah wondered, what if this wasn't what it seemed? The knock came just after noon. Sarah froze. No one ever knocked on her door at noon. She glanced at the clock, then at the sink full of unwashed dishes, then at the stack of rejection emails open on her laptop. 3 job applications, 3 polite refusals, all before lunchtime. The knock came again. Firm, patient. Sarah hesitated, then walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Her breath caught. It was him, the man from the restaurant, the billionaire. He stood there calmly, dressed just as sharply as before, raincoat draped over one arm, eyes fixed on the door like he already knew she was there. For a moment, Sarah considered pretending she wasn't home. But something in his posture, controlled, unmoving, made her reach for the lock. She opened the door halfway. "Yes?" she asked, her voice tight. "I'm looking for Sarah Collins," he said. "That's me. I'd like to speak with you." Her heart pounded. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Was this another complaint? Another humiliation? A threat? "You already said enough," she replied quietly. "I lost my job." The man's brow furrowed. "I never complained," he said. The words landed hard. "What?" Sarah asked. "I didn't file a complaint. I didn't speak to your manager. I didn't speak to anyone." Sarah felt dizzy. "Then why?" "May I come in?" he asked. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He looked around the small apartment for both the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the children's drawings taped to the wall. His eyes lingered there longer than anywhere else. "You work very hard," he said. Sarah folded her arms. "That didn't matter." "It did to me," he replied. "Which is why I'm here." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and placed it gently on the table. "I need you to tell me something," he said. "Exactly what your manager told you." Sarah stared at the paper. Her instincts screamed that this moment mattered. She didn't know why, but she knew one thing for certain. This story wasn't over. Sarah didn't sit, neither did he. The folded paper lay between them like a quiet threat. "He said you complained," she finally said. "That you were unhappy with my attitude, that I made you uncomfortable." The man's jaw tightened, not in anger or anger, but restraint. "That is a lie," he said calmly. Sarah's chest felt tight. "He fired me," she continued. "On the spot, no warning, no proof, just gone." The man nodded slowly as if confirming something he already suspected. "I've been observing that restaurant for months," he said. "Not the food, the management." Sarah looked up. "Why?" "Because places like that survive on silence," he replied. "Workers afraid to speak, managers who abuse power, and customers who never question it." He reached for the paper and unfolded it. Sarah's eyes widened. It wasn't a letter. It was a legal document. "The receipt wasn't the test," he said quietly. "Your reaction was." Sarah shook her head. I don't understand. You were humiliated publicly, he said, and yet you didn't lash out, you didn't beg, you didn't curse me. You finished your shift. He looked directly at her. That told me everything. Sarah felt tears rise, uninvited. So why zero? She whispered. Because money reveals who people are, he answered, especially when it's missing. He slid another document across the table. A court filing. I'm suing the restaurant, he said, for wrongful termination, fraud, and retaliation. Sarah stared at the paper, heart racing. And you, he continued, are the key witness. Her mouth went dry. I'm just a waitress. He shook his head. No, he said. You're the truth they tried to bury. And for the first time since that night, Sarah felt something shift. Hope. Sarah didn't touch the papers. They sat on the table like they didn't belong in her apartment. Thick, official. Heavy with consequences. I don't have money for lawyers, she said finally. I don't even have a job. The man nodded, as if he had expected that answer. You won't need either, he replied. She looked up sharply. I've already retained legal counsel, he continued. The best. They work for me, and if you agree to testify, they'll protect you. Protect me from what? Sarah asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the cracked parking lot below. Children's bikes leaned against rusted railings. A stray cat dug through a trash bag. From retaliation, he said at last. From intimidation. From lies. Sarah's stomach twisted. You think they'll come after me? I know they will, he said calmly. They already fired you without cause. That tells me everything. Silence filled the room. Sarah's thoughts raced. Court meant exposure, fear, risk, her name on record, her children dragged into something ugly. What if I lose? She asked quietly. The man turned back to her. You already did, he said gently. They took your job, your income, your dignity. She swallowed hard. And what if I win? She asked. A pause. Then you don't just get justice, he said. You get leverage. He slid one final document across the table. An agreement. If she testified truthfully, she would receive back pay, compensation, legal protection. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. And if I say no? She asked. He met her eyes. Then I walk away, he said, and they continue doing this to the next person, and the next. That was the moment it hit her. This wasn't about the tip. This wasn't about money. It was about power. Sarah looked toward the hallway where her children slept. She thought of Lily's quiet questions, Marcus's hopeful eyes, and the receipt that had changed everything. She picked up the pen. I'll do it, she said. The man nodded once. Good, he replied, because tomorrow, this becomes public. The story broke the next morning. Sarah didn't see it at first. She was making breakfast when her phone started vibrating non-stop on the counter. One notification turned into 10. 10 turned into dozens. Unknown numbers, missed calls, messages she didn't recognize. Her heart began to race. She wiped her hands and opened the first alert. Local news. Billionaire files lawsuit against popular restaurant chain. Her name wasn't in the headline, but it was in the article. Wrongfully terminated waitress, it read. Single mother, another line said. Key witness. Sarah sank into a chair. By noon, her inbox was flooded. Some messages were supportive. You didn't deserve that. Stay strong. We're rooting for you. Others were not. You're lying. You're ruining good people's lives. Drop the case. Then came the call. A blocked number. She hesitated before answering. Sarah Collins, a male voice said. Calm. Too calm. This situation doesn't have to get ugly. Her stomach dropped. I don't know who this is, she replied. You know exactly who I represent, the voice said. The restaurant is willing to offer you a private settlement. How much? Sarah asked, surprised at her own steadiness. Enough, he said. If you walk away, today. And if I don't? A pause. Then we start digging, the man replied. Your work history, your personal life, your parenting. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, shaking. Minutes later, a car slowed outside her apartment, not stopping, just passing. Then passing again. Her doorbell rang. She jumped. This time it wasn't the billionaire. It was Mark, her former manager. He stood in the hallway, hands raised like he came in peace, but his eyes were sharp. You made a mistake, he said quietly. You should have kept your mouth shut. Sarah felt fear crawl up her spine. You lied, she said. You cost me my job. Mark leaned closer. No, he whispered. You're costing yourself your future. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away. That night, Sarah locked every door. For the first time, She wondered if telling the truth would cost her more than she could afford. And somewhere across the city, the billionaire was watching it all unfold. Sarah didn't sleep. Every sound felt louder than it should. Every shadow seemed to move. She checked the locks twice, then a third time before finally sitting on the couch with the lights on. At 2:14 a.m. her phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. You still have time to fix this. Her hands went cold. She didn't reply. Seconds later, another message appeared. Walk away, and this all disappears. Then a third. Think about your kids. That was the one that broke her. She forwarded the messages immediately to the billionaire's legal team, just as they had instructed. Within minutes, her phone rang. This is exactly what we needed, the lawyer said. Do not respond. Do not delete anything. What does it mean? Sarah asked. It means they're panicking. The next day, the restaurant released a public statement. They denied everything. They claimed Sarah had been fired for repeated performance issues and accused her of fabricating the story for attention. The comments were brutal. Sarah stopped reading when she saw someone post her apartment building's address. By afternoon, a delivery arrived. A package. No return address. Inside was an envelope, and inside that, a printed screenshot. The messages from the unknown number. Only these had something else attached, a company email signature. The restaurant's legal department. Sarah's knees buckled. They had made a mistake, a fatal one. The billionaire arrived that evening, calm as ever. They crossed the line, he said after examining the evidence. Threats, witness intimidation, and now, proof. What happens now? Sarah asked. He allowed himself a small smile. Now, he said, they're no longer defending themselves. He handed her another document, an amended lawsuit, charges added, penalties multiplied. This goes to trial, he continued. And when it does, they won't be able to hide. Sarah exhaled slowly. For the first time since the receipt, the fear loosened its grip, because the truth had teeth now, and it was coming for them. The restaurant tried to contain the damage. They couldn't. Within days, rumors began leaking from inside. Anonymous posts appeared online. Former employees started talking. The story had moved beyond Sarah, and that terrified them. Sarah learned this during a late-night call from the billionaire's lead attorney. We have a problem, the lawyer said, and it's also an opportunity. Sarah's heart skipped. What kind of problem? Someone from inside the restaurant wants to testify. Sarah sat up straight. Who? They won't give a name yet, the lawyer replied. They're scared, but they claim the manager has done this before. A chill ran through Sarah. Before. She's not the only one, the lawyer continued. There are others, fired after wealthy customers, blamed for things they didn't do. Sarah closed her eyes. She had seen it. Waitresses disappearing, cooks suddenly gone. No explanations, just silence. They say there are recordings, the lawyer added. Sarah's breath caught. Recordings of what? Meetings, instructions, orders from management about how to handle certain customers. Later that night, Sarah sat alone at her kitchen table again. Same place, same silence, different weight. This was bigger than her. Much bigger. The next morning, the witness finally agreed to meet. Not at the lawyer's office, not in public, in a parking garage. Sarah didn't want to go, but the billionaire insisted. You should hear this yourself, he said. You deserve to know how deep it goes. The garage smelled like oil and concrete. Their footsteps echoed as a woman stepped out from behind a pillar. Her hands shook. I don't have much time, the woman said. They're watching. She was a former supervisor. She explained everything. The pressure to protect high-profile customers, the fake complaints, the quiet firings, the bonuses for managers who kept things clean. Then she said the words Sarah would never forget. You were targeted. Sarah's chest tightened. Why me? She asked. The woman swallowed. Because you didn't fit their image, because they thought no one would defend you. The billionaire's expression darkened. And the recordings? He asked. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. They're all here. As she walked away, Sarah realized something chilling. The restaurant hadn't just lied. They had built a system around it. And systems don't fall quietly. The flash drive changed everything. By morning, the legal team confirmed what the woman had claimed. The recordings were real. Clear voices, clear instructions, clear intent. Managers discussing which employees were disposable. Executives talking about containing damage. And Mark's voice, calm, confident, lying without hesitation. Sarah listened to only a few minutes before turning it off. She felt sick. "These recordings will destroy them," the lawyer said during the emergency meeting, "if they go public." "If?" Sarah asked. The billionaire leaned back in his chair. "That depends on what happens next." Within hours, the restaurant's lawyers requested a private meeting. No press, no cameras, no statements, just a room and a deal. Sarah wasn't invited. She waited in a side office, staring at the wall clock as minutes dragged into an hour. Her mind filled with doubt. What if they settled? What if the truth never came out? What if this ended quietly and nothing changed? The door finally opened. The billionaire stepped out alone. "They want to settle," he said. Sarah's heart dropped. "They're offering money," he continued. "A lot of it." "How much?" she asked. "Enough to make this disappear," he said. "For you, for me, for everyone." Sarah swallowed. "And the recordings? They want them buried." The room felt smaller. "So they get away with it," Sarah said. The billionaire studied her carefully. "This is where most stories end," he said. Silence bought with comfort. Sarah thought of the women who came before her, the ones who never spoke, the ones who were fired quietly and forgotten. She shook her head. "I didn't come this far to be quiet," she said. The billionaire nodded once. "That's what I hoped you'd say." Before he could say more, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "They've made another move," he said. "What kind of move?" Sarah asked. "They've turned on each other," he replied. "And someone just broke ranks." He looked at her. "They're preparing to blame Mark." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Is that bad?" "It depends," he said. "Because if Mark talks—" He paused. "This goes from a lawsuit to a public reckoning." Mark stopped sleeping. It showed in his face. When Sarah saw him again, she barely recognized him. The confident manager was gone. In his place stood a man unraveling at the edges, tie crooked, eyes sunken, hands that couldn't stay still. They met in a quiet diner on the edge of town. Mark had asked for the meeting. "I didn't want this," he said the moment she sat down. "You need to understand that." Sarah didn't respond. "I was following orders," he continued. "That's all. They told me what to do, who to protect, who to sacrifice." "By lying," Sarah said calmly. Mark flinched. "They promised me protection," he said. "Legal coverage, bonuses, a promotion." "And now?" she asked. He laughed bitterly. "Now they've cut me loose." Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They're going to say I acted alone," he said. "That I fired you without authorization." Sarah's heart pounded. "And did you?" Mark hesitated. "That night," he admitted, "the complaint didn't exist. I made it up." The words hung between them. Sarah felt a strange mix of anger and relief. "Why?" she asked. "Because it was easier," Mark replied. "Because you were safe to blame." Silence. "They're offering me a deal," Mark continued. "Full immunity, if I testify against you." Sarah's breath caught. "Against me?" she asked. "They want me to say you were unprofessional, aggressive, that you deserved it." Sarah leaned back. "And if you don't?" Mark's voice dropped. "They'll bury me." He reached into his jacket and slid something across the table. "Another flash drive." "There's more," he said. "Meetings, emails, orders from higher up." Sarah stared at it. "You should give this to your lawyers," she said. Mark nodded. "I will," he replied. "But I need something." She met his eyes. "I need protection," he said. "And I need you to tell them I came to you first." Sarah stood slowly. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "But the truth doesn't belong to you anymore." Mark watched her walk away. For the first time he looked afraid, because he knew what was coming. And this time, there was no one left to blame. The courthouse had never seen a line like this. Reporters crowded the steps before sunrise. Cameras clicked non-stop. People whispered as Sarah stepped out of the car, her hands shaking despite her effort to stay calm. This was no longer just her story. It had become everyone's. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Former employees sat together, avoiding eye contact with management. Executives whispered urgently to their lawyers. Mark sat alone, pale and rigid, staring straight ahead. Sarah took her seat beside the billionaire and his legal team. "Remember," her attorney whispered, "tell the truth. Let them collapse under it." The judge entered. Silence fell instantly. The restaurant's lawyers moved first. They filed a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that Sarah had been terminated legally and that the recordings were taken out of context. The judge listened carefully. Then he spoke. Motion denied. A ripple ran through the room. The judge turned his attention to the recordings. These materials suggest a pattern of misconduct, he said, including intimidation of witnesses. Gasps echoed. Sarah felt her pulse race. This court will allow all evidence, the judge continued, and I expect honesty. The restaurant's lead attorney stood abruptly. Your Honor, he said, we request a recess. Denied. The judge turned toward the prosecution. Call your first witness. The billionaire stood. We call Sarah Collins. Sarah's legs felt weak as she rose. As she walked to the stand, she felt hundreds of eyes on her. She took a breath and told the truth. Sarah's voice was steady. She described the night in detail, the silence, the receipt, the humiliation, the firing, the threats. The defense tried to shake her. They questioned her professionalism, her tone, her memory. She didn't break. Then came the recordings. The courtroom heard Mark's voice. Cold, calculated. Fire her, he said in one clip. She's replaceable. The judge leaned forward. The defense objected, overruled. The recordings continued. Executives discussing sacrificing staff to protect wealthy clients, laughing about lawsuits, mocking workers who couldn't fight back. Several jurors looked visibly disturbed. Then Mark was called. He didn't look at Sarah. Under oath, he admitted everything. The lie, the firing, the pressure from above. When asked why he chose Sarah, his answer stunned the room. She had no power, he said quietly, and no one to defend her. The judge called a recess. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Inside, the restaurant's executives argued fiercely. They were losing control. When court resumed, the defense made a desperate move. They blamed Mark entirely. But Mark wasn't finished. He produced emails, signatures, instructions, bonuses approved. Names were read aloud. Executives shifted uncomfortably. One stood up, then another. The judge slammed his gavel. Sit down. The billionaire's attorney moved to add charges. Corporate retaliation, witness intimidation, fraud. The judge approved all of them. By the end of the day, the restaurant's legal team requested a settlement. Publicly. They offered millions. The billionaire stood. No, he said, we finished this. Sarah's breath caught. The judge nodded. So ordered. That night, stock prices fell. Sponsors pulled out. The restaurant closed multiple locations. The truth was no longer containable. The courtroom was silent. The jury returned. Sarah held her breath. The foreperson stood. On all counts, she said, we find in favor of the plaintiff. The judge didn't hesitate. He ruled against the restaurant. Massive damages, mandatory reforms, executive terminations. Sarah felt tears stream down her face. The judge turned to her. Miss Collins, he said, this court recognizes your courage. Outside, the world exploded. News vans, headlines, applause. The billionaire stood beside her. This wasn't about money, he said quietly. It was about dignity. Sarah looked up. And now? She asked. He smiled. Now, he said, we rebuild. The applause faded faster than Sarah expected. One moment, cameras flashed and reporters shouted her name. The next, she was back in her apartment, standing alone in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The world had changed, but it hadn't felt real yet. Her phone buzzed constantly, interview requests, messages from strangers, former coworkers apologizing. She ignored most of them. Fame felt loud, too loud. What felt real was Lily's arms around her waist. Does this mean you won't be sad anymore? Her daughter asked quietly. Sarah knelt and pulled both children close. It means, she said softly, we're safe. That night, for the first time in months, she slept without fear. Days later, the settlement funds were transferred. Numbers Sarah had never imagined seeing appeared on her screen. Enough to pay debts, enough to breathe. But money didn't erase what happened. She still flinched when her phone rang. Still replayed Mark's voice in her mind. Still remembered the way humiliation had burned her chest. The billionaire visited once more, this time without lawyers. You don't owe me anything, he told her. But I want to offer you something. He explained his foundation, how it supported workers abused by corporations, how stories like hers were everywhere, just buried. I need someone who understands this from the inside, he said. Someone honest. Sarah hesitated. I've never worked in an office, she said. He smiled. You've worked in the real world, he replied. That's harder. She didn't answer right away, because accepting meant stepping forward again, and courage still scared her. Sarah accepted the job. Not because of the title, not because of the salary, because she didn't want what happened to her to happen again. Her first day at the foundation was quiet. No applause, no cameras, just a small office and a stack of case files. She opened the first one. A waitress. Fired after a complaint. No evidence. Then another. A janitor. Threatened into silence. A delivery driver. Blacklisted for speaking up. Page after page. Her chest tightened. This was bigger than one restaurant. She spent hours listening to voices that shook just like hers once had. People afraid, angry, tired, and for the first time, she wasn't powerless. Weeks later, she testified again, this time before a labor board. Not as a victim, as an advocate. The headlines changed. From waitress humiliated to whistleblower sparks reform. But something still bothered her. One unanswered question. She finally asked the billionaire during a late meeting. "Why me?" she said. "Why that night?" He paused. "I grew up watching my mother be humiliated at work," he said quietly. "I promised myself I'd never ignore it again." Sarah nodded. Some wounds recognize each other. One evening, months later, Sarah received a letter. No return address. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a short note. "I was wrong. I ruined lives to protect my own. You did what I never had the courage to do." It was signed by Mark. Sarah sat with the letter for a long time. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt closure. That night, she stood at her window, watching the city lights glow. The same city that once swallowed her whole. She thought of the receipt. $0. How something meant to humiliate her had exposed a system built on silence. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Some chapters were meant to stay closed. But her story? That one was just beginning. Sarah didn't plan to go back. But one afternoon, she found herself standing across the street from the restaurant. The windows were dark. The sign was gone. A paper notice hung crookedly on the door, closed permanently. She stood there for a long moment, the sounds of the city passing behind her. This was where it all began. Not with shouting, not with violence, but with silence. A quiet man, a quiet receipt, a quiet decision that changed everything. Inside, workers were clearing out what remained. One recognized her. "You don't work here anymore," the woman said gently. "I know," Sarah replied. "I just needed to see it." Before she left, the woman handed her something. A plate, the same kind they used that night. White, chipped at the edge. "They were throwing everything away," the woman said. "I thought you might want this." Sarah took it carefully. At home, she mounted the plate on the wall above her desk. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. That humiliation didn't end her story. It exposed it. Visitors sometimes asked about it. Sarah always answered the same way. "That plate taught me my worth isn't decided by someone else's tip." Years later, Sarah stood in front of a room filled with people, not customers, listeners. She told her story the same way every time, not to inspire pity, but courage. She held up a photo of a receipt on the screen behind her. $. "That number," she said, "almost convinced me I was nothing." The room was silent. "But 0, she continued, "isn't emptiness. It's a beginning." She explained how systems depend on silence, how fear keeps people small, how dignity survives even public humiliation. After the talk, a young waitress approached her. "They did the same thing to me," the woman whispered. Sarah smiled and handed her a card. "You're not alone anymore," she said. That night, Sarah returned home to laughter, warmth, and peace. She looked at the plate on the wall one last time before turning off the lights. Once, it had held a meal. Once, it had held shame. Now, it held truth. And the world had changed, not because a billionaire left a tip, but because a single mother refused to believe she was worth 0. Sometimes the smallest number reveals the biggest lie. If this story moved you, subscribe for more powerful real-life stories. And comment, "I subscribe." I personally welcome everyone.